A divorced mom saw a stray dog at the old pier every day, but she never imagined would lead her to something shocking. At first, it seemed simple, a lonely dog waiting by the sea. But when she followed it, she uncovered a hidden box buried beneath the pier, filled with photos, a wedding ring, and a letter that was never delivered. What she discovered inside wasn't just history. It was tied to her own family in ways she could never have guessed. Secrets buried for decades. A man who vanished without a trace. And a truth powerful enough to heal or to shatter everything she thought she knew about her past. Why has this dog been waiting here all these years? And what will happen when the truth finally comes to light? Let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. If you like stories that connect us, don't forget to subscribe before you leave. The salty breeze nipped at Emily Carter's cheeks as she made her way down the weathered planks of Seavale Pier. Her boots made hollow thuds against the wooden boards, echoing across the quiet morning waterfront. The thermos of coffee in her hands provided welcome warmth on this chilly autumn morning. Steam rising from the metal cup, like tiny clouds disappearing into the gray sky dot at 42. Emily had made these solitary morning walks a ritual since moving to the small coastal town 6 months ago. The divorce papers had been finalized just before the move, and these peaceful moments helped clear her head before facing another day of single motherhood. The familiar sight at the end of the pier made her slow her steps. There it was again, the shaggy brown dog with patches of gray around its muzzle, sitting perfectly still and staring out at the rolling waves. Emily had seen it there nearly every morning for the past few weeks, always in the exact same spot, always with that same intense focus on the horizon. Strange, she whispered to herself, clutching her thermos closer. Something about the dog's presence tugged at her heart. Its fur was matted in places, and even from this distance, she could see its ribs showing slightly through its coat. But it didn't have the typical desperate look of a stray. There was something almost noble in the way it held itself, patient and watchful. Emily took a few steps closer, then hesitated. The dog hadn't moved, hadn't even acknowledged her presence. She'd always been cautious around strays, but this one seemed different somehow. Before she could decide whether to approach, a gruff voice called out behind her. "Morning, miss. Checking out our local guardian, are you?" Emily turned to see an elderly fisherman approaching, his rubber boots squeaking against the damp wood. His weathered face crinkled into a kind smile as he stopped beside her, setting down his tackle box. "Guardian?" Emily asked, glancing back at the dog. "That's what some of us call him," the fisherman explained, adjusting his worn canvas hat. "Been coming here every single morning for months now. Rain or shine, doesn't matter. Shows up at sunrise, stays for a few hours, then disappears until the next day. Months?" Emily's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Does anyone know where it comes from?" The old fisherman shook his head. "Nobody's been able to get close enough to check for tags or anything. Friendly enough, doesn't growl or bark at folks, but won't let anyone near. Just sits there like it's watching for something." He paused, looking out at the water. "Or guarding something, maybe." Emily took another sip of her coffee, studying the mysterious animal. "Has anyone tried to help it? Give it food or shelter?" "Oh, plenty have tried. Old Martha from the diner leaves food sometimes, but it barely touches it. Seems more interested in whatever it's waiting for than any handouts." The fisherman picked up his tackle box. "Well, good day to you, miss. Some fish won't catch themselves." As the fisherman's footsteps faded away, Emily stood for a long moment, watching the dog. Its stillness was almost unnatural, its focus unwavering. Eventually, she turned and headed back home, but her thoughts remained with the mysterious guardian of the pier. That evening, Emily stirred the pot of pasta sauce on the stove, trying to ignore the tense silence filling their small rental house. The kitchen barely had enough counter space for food preparation, and the dining area consisted of a cramped corner with a second-hand table. It wasn't much, but it was what she could afford on her salary from the local bookstore. "Dinner's ready," she called out, her voice echoing slightly in the modest space. Lily, her 14-year-old daughter, trudged into the kitchen, phone in hand and a scowl on her face. She dropped heavily into one of the mismatched chairs, not looking up from her screen. "Can you put the phone away while we eat?" Emily asked gently, setting a plate of spaghetti in front of her daughter. Lily rolled her eyes but complied, shoving the phone into the pocket of her oversized hoodie. "Whatever." Emily sat down across from her daughter, trying to ignore the way her heart clenched at the familiar tension between them. "How was school today?" "Fine." Lily pushed the pasta around her plate. "Jessica invited me to sleep over this weekend." "Oh?" Emily tried to keep her voice neutral, encouraging. "Yeah, but I told her I probably couldn't. Her house is huge with like 5 bedrooms and an actual dining room." Lily's fork clattered against the plate. "Not like this place." Emily took a deep breath. "Lily, I know this isn't what you're used to. You mean it's not like the house we had before Dad left?" Lily cut in, her voice sharp with hurt. "Before you made us move to this stupid town where we can barely afford a 2-bedroom dump." "That's enough," Emily said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she set down her fork. "Your father and I both agreed this fresh start would be good for all of us. Right. That's why he's off living in his fancy apartment in the city while we're stuck. Here." Lily pushed her chair back from the table. "I'm not hungry." "Lily, please." But her daughter was already storming off to her room, leaving Emily alone at the small table with 2 plates of cooling spaghetti. Emily pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears. These moments were the hardest, when Lily's pain spilled over into anger, and Emily felt powerless to help. The divorce had been necessary, but explaining that to a 14-year-old who missed her father was nearly impossible. Late that night, after the dishes were done and the house had settled into silence, Emily sat at her bedroom window, looking out at the sliver of ocean visible between the buildings. The mysterious dog from the pier came to mind, and she found herself wondering about its story. What could make a creature return to the same spot day after day, waiting with such patience and purpose? Her alarm seemed to ring too early the next morning, but Emily got up anyway, drawn by an inexplicable urge to return to the pier. The sky was just beginning to lighten as she made her way down the empty street, another thermos of coffee in hand. The morning air was even chillier than the day before, and Emily pulled her jacket tighter around herself as she approached the pier. The wooden planks were slick with morning dew, requiring careful steps as she made her way toward the end. Her heart beat a little faster as she rounded the slight curve in the pier. And there it was. The dog sat in exactly the same spot as yesterday, its shaggy form a dark silhouette against the pale pink sunrise. As Emily drew closer, something different happened. The dog turned its head, looking directly at her with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to hold years of wisdom. The moments stretched between them, and Emily had the strange sensation that the dog had indeed been expecting her. Its gaze was steady, almost knowing, and for the first time, Emily felt certain that there was more to this animal's story than anyone in town had guessed. She stood there, coffee forgotten in her hands, as the sun continued its slow rise over the water. The dog watched her for another moment before turning its attention back to the horizon, resuming its vigilant watch over whatever secrets the ocean might hold. Emily stood frozen on the pier, her coffee thermos slipping slightly in her grip as the dog suddenly sprang to life. Its ears perked up, and without warning, it let out a series of sharp, urgent barks. Before she could react, the shaggy creature darted toward the edge of the pier, where the weathered boards met the sandy beach below. Her heart racing, Emily followed cautiously, her shoes making hollow sounds against the wooden planks. The dog stopped at a section where several boards had rotted away, creating a gap large enough to see the sand beneath. It barked again, pawing at the edge of the opening and looking back at her with those intelligent brown eyes. "What is it?" Emily whispered, more to herself than the dog. She knelt down, peering through the gap. The early morning light filtered between the boards, creating strips of illumination on the damp sand below. Something caught the light, a glint of metal partially buried in the sand. Emily glanced around the empty pier, then carefully made her way down to the beach, ducking under the structure. The space beneath the pier felt like a different world, cool, dim, and slightly eerie. The sound of gentle waves seemed amplified in this shadowy chamber, and the smell of salt and seaweed was stronger here. The dog had somehow beaten her there, already scratching at the sand where she'd seen the metallic gleam. As Emily approached, she could make out the corner of what appeared to be a box protruding from the sand. Years of tides had nearly buried it completely. "Hold on," she murmured to the dog, who stepped back obligingly as she knelt in the damp sand. Emily began digging with her hands, not caring about the grit under her fingernails or the cold wetness seeping through her jeans. After several minutes of careful excavation, she unveiled a metal lockbox, about the size of a thick novel. The box was crusted with rust and tangled strands of dried seaweed, its once smooth surface pitted and corroded by years of salt water exposure. It felt surprisingly heavy as Emily lifted it from its sandy grave. The latch was rusted shut, but the lock itself had long since deteriorated. The dog sat watching her, its tail sweeping gentle arcs in the sand. "I guess this is what you've been guarding all this time," Emily said softly. The animal tilted its head, almost as if in agreement. Emily tucked the box under her arm and climbed carefully back up to the pier. The dog followed her part way, then stopped, watching as she walked away. When she turned back one last time, it had already returned to its usual spot, resuming its endless vigil. Back home, Emily placed the mysterious box on her kitchen counter. Lily had already left for school, leaving Emily alone with her discovery. She spent the next hour carefully cleaning years of accumulated grime from the box, using an old toothbrush and warm water to gradually reveal its original brass surface. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked at the rusted latch. It finally gave way with a brittle snap, and Emily held her breath as she lifted the lid. The inside of the box had remained remarkably dry, protected by its tight seal. The first thing she saw were the photographs, several black and white images. Their edges softened with age, but the images still clear. Emily picked up the top photo, studying the figures captured in that long-ago moment. A rugged-looking man in fisherman's clothing stood on what appeared to be the same pier where she'd found the box. His weather-beaten face was creased in a warm smile as he looked down at a young girl, probably around 8 or 9 years old, who was proudly holding up a fish nearly as long as she was tall. Emily's fingers traced the outline of their faces, wondering about their story. There were more photos underneath. The same pair in different settings, always by the water, always sharing that same comfortable closeness that spoke of a deep bond between father and daughter. Beneath the photos, something caught the light, a plain gold wedding band, tarnished with age but still intact. Emily picked it up carefully, turning it over in her palm. There were no engravings, no distinguishing marks, just a simple circle of gold that had once symbolized someone's promises and dreams. Down at the bottom of the box lay an envelope, its paper yellowed and delicate with age. Written across the front in shaky handwriting were the words, "Never delivered." Emily's heart beat faster as she carefully opened the envelope, trying not to tear the fragile paper. The letter inside was written in the same unsteady hand, the ink faded but still legible in most places. Emily began to read. "My dearest Anna, time has made a fool of my pride, and now it may be too late. The words I should have said years ago stick in my throat like fish bones. sharp with regret. The sea has been my life, but it cost me everything that mattered most. You were right to take her away, to give her a chance at a different life than the one I could offer. But not a day goes by that I don't see her face, don't remember her laughter on this old pier. I know I have no right to ask your forgiveness. A man who chooses the sea over his own family deserves the loneliness he finds. But if there's any mercy left in your heart, the rest of the letter was too faded to make out, the words dissolving into pale brown marks on the aging paper. Emily sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of the unknown writer's regret and longing. Who was Anna? What had happened to separate this family? As evening settled over the small rental house, Emily spread the photographs across her dining table, studying each one in the warm lamplight. The sound of Lily's footsteps in the hallway barely registered until her daughter spoke. "What are those?" Emily looked up to find Lily standing in the doorway, her usual defensive posture softened by curiosity. She walked over to the table and picked up one of the photos, frowning as she studied it. "Mom." Lily's voice held a note of confusion. "This girl looks like Grandma when she was younger." The words hung in the air between them, opening up a world of questions neither of them was prepared to answer. The next morning, Emily carefully packed the photos and letter into her worn leather messenger bag. The Historical Society occupied an old Victorian house on Cedar Street, its white paint peeling and green shutters faded by years of salty air. A brass bell tinkled as she pushed open the heavy wooden door. Inside, the air smelled of old books and furniture polish. Display cases lined the walls, filled with maritime artifacts and faded photographs of the town's early days. An elderly woman looked up from behind an antique desk, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice warm and gentle. "I hope so," Emily replied, pulling out the photos and letter. "I found these yesterday, and I'm trying to learn more about the people in them." The curator, who introduced herself as Margaret Wilson, carefully put on a pair of cotton gloves before handling the photographs. Her eyes widened as she studied the first image. "Oh my," she breathed. "This is Samuel Hayes. I haven't seen his face in 40 years. Emily leaned forward eagerly. "You knew him?" "Everyone knew Samuel," Margaret said, settling into her chair. "He was one of our most reliable fishermen. Went out every morning before dawn, always came back with a full catch. That is, until the day he didn't come back at all." Margaret's fingers trembled slightly as she arranged the photos on her desk. It was 1983. Samuel went out one morning, just like any other day. His boat was found drifting empty that afternoon. No sign of struggle, no distress call, nothing. Just gone. She paused, studying the photo of Samuel with the young girl. His wife Anna was devastated at first. She waited for months, hoping he'd return. Eventually, she remarried and moved inland with their daughter. The family just drifted away, like so many do when tragedy strikes. "Were there any theories about what happened?" Emily asked. Margaret's expression grew troubled. "There were rumors, of course. Some said he'd run away, abandoned his family. He'd been drinking more in those last months, struggling with something he wouldn't talk about. But nothing was ever proven. The sea keeps its secrets well." That evening, Emily sat at her computer, scrolling through digitized newspaper archives. Lily hovered nearby, pretending to do homework but clearly distracted by her mother's research. "Here it is," Emily said softly, clicking on an article from 40 years ago. The headline read, "Local fisherman missing at sea. Samuel Hayes disappears without a trace." Lily abandoned all pretense of studying and moved closer to read over her mother's shoulder. "Mom, do you think?" She hesitated, then continued, "Could our family be connected to this somehow? That girl in the photo really does look like the pictures we have of Grandma." Emily stared at the photo of Samuel and the young girl, her heart pounding. The girl's familiar features seemed to jump out at her now. The same slight tilt to the eyes, the same curve of the smile that she'd seen in old photos of her mother. Could Samuel Hayes be her grandfather? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, opening up a world of questions about her own history that she'd never thought to ask. The yellowed photograph seemed to hold both answers and mysteries, a bridge between past and present that Emily wasn't sure she was ready to cross. Yet something in Samuel's eyes, that mix of warmth and sadness, called to her, demanding that his story be told. The morning sun cast long shadows across Mrs. Jensen's front porch as Emily stood at the door, clutching the old photograph in her trembling hands. She had barely slept, her mind racing with questions about her mother's past. The wooden steps creaked beneath her feet as she shifted her weight, waiting after ringing the doorbell. Mrs. Jensen opened the door, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wearing a floral housecoat and a warm smile. "Emily, dear, what brings you by so early?" "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Jensen, but I need your help with something." Emily's voice wavered slightly. "It's about my mother." Mrs. Jensen's expression softened. She had been a fixture in the neighborhood for decades, one of the few people who had known Emily's mother in her youth. Come in. I just made a fresh pot of coffee." The inside of Mrs. Jensen's house smelled of cinnamon and fresh-baked bread. Family photos lined the walls, telling stories of generations past. Emily followed her neighbor into the cozy kitchen, where sunlight streamed through lace curtains onto a well-worn wooden table. "Sit down, dear," Mrs. Jensen said, pouring 2 cups of coffee. "Now, what's troubling you?" Emily placed the photograph on the table, sliding it toward Mrs. Jensen. "I found this recently. The girl in the photo, I think it might be my mother." Mrs. Jensen settled her reading glasses on her nose and picked up the photograph. The moment she saw it, her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my word," she whispered, her eyes wide with recognition. "That's Margaret. Clear as day. I'd know that smile anywhere." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "You're sure?" "Absolutely certain." Mrs. Jensen traced the outline of the young girl's face with her finger. "This would have been, around 1979 or 80, I'd say. She was about 14 then. Always such a pretty girl, your mother." Emily's hands shook as she reached for her coffee cup. "The man in the photo? His name is Samuel Hayes. He disappeared from the pier 40 years ago." Mrs. Jensen's eyes narrowed as she studied the photograph more closely. "Samuel Hayes," she repeated slowly. "Yes, I remember when he vanished. It was all anyone talked about for months." She looked up at Emily. "Where did you find this?" Emily explained about the dog, the lockbox, and her visit to the Historical Society. As she spoke, Mrs. Jensen's expression grew increasingly thoughtful. "Your mother never spoke about her early life here, did she?" Mrs. Jensen asked quietly. "No," Emily replied. She always changed the subject when anyone asked about her childhood. "I assumed it was too painful after losing her parents, but now," she swallowed hard. "Mrs. Jensen, could Samuel Hayes have been my mother's real father?" The elderly woman sat back in her chair, her coffee forgotten. "It would explain a lot," she said slowly. "Margaret changed after Samuel disappeared. Became withdrawn, quiet. Not long after, she and her mother moved away. We all assumed it was because of the gossip, but maybe there was more to it." Emily felt as though the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew about her family history was unraveling. Why wouldn't she have told me? "Sometimes, dear, the hardest stories to tell are the ones closest to our hearts," Mrs. Jensen said gently. "Your mother carried a lot of pain. Maybe she thought she was protecting you by keeping the past buried." Emily spent another hour with Mrs. Jensen, gathering what details she could about her mother's youth. When she finally left, her head was spinning with new information and even more questions. Back home, she found Lily sprawled on the living room couch with her phone, "Hey, Mom," she said, glancing up. "Where did you go so early?" Emily sat down beside her daughter. "I took the photo to Mrs. Jensen. She confirmed it. The girl in the picture is definitely your grandmother." Lily sat up straighter, her phone forgotten. "Seriously? But how is that possible? Grandma never said anything about growing up here." "I know," Emily said. "And there's more. Based on the timing and what Mrs. Jensen remembers, I think Samuel Hayes might have been her father, your great-grandfather." Lily's forehead wrinkled in skepticism. "Mom, don't you think you're jumping to conclusions? Just because there's an old photo doesn't mean we're related to this guy." But Emily could see the curiosity in her daughter's eyes, the same need to understand that had been driving her own investigation. "Maybe," she admitted, "but there are too many coincidences. The resemblance, the timing, the way Mom never talked about her past, it all fits. But why wouldn't Grandma have told us?" Lily asked, echoing Emily's earlier question to Mrs. Jensen. Emily thought about her own divorce, about the painful truths she sometimes struggled to share with Lily. "Sometimes, keeping secrets feels easier than facing the pain they carry," she said softly. "I think I understand that better now." As she spoke the words, Emily felt an unexpected connection to Samuel Hayes. Here was a man who had tried to make amends, who had written a letter full of regret that never reached its destination. How many times had she herself wished she could undo past mistakes, heal old wounds? The parallels between Samuel's story and her own life struck her with sudden clarity. The broken relationships, the weight of regret, the secrets that rippled through generations. Maybe this wasn't just about solving a mystery anymore. Maybe it was about understanding her own story better, about breaking the cycle of silence that had shaped her family for so long. That night, Emily tossed and turned in her bed, her mind full of images. The dog at the pier, Samuel Hayes' weathered face, her mother as a young girl. When sleep finally came, it brought vivid dreams with it. In her dream, she stood at the end of the pier in the pre-dawn darkness. The shaggy dog was there, its eyes gleaming with an almost human intelligence. It barked at her, urgent and insistent, then turned and ran toward the water's edge. Emily knew she should follow, could feel the importance of whatever the dog wanted to show her, but her feet wouldn't move. The dog barked again, more frantically now. The sound echoed across the water, mixing with the crash of waves and the distant cry of seagulls. Just as Emily managed to take a step forward, she jerked awake, her heart pounding. The digital clock on her nightstand showed 3:17 in the morning. Emily lay in the darkness, the dream still vivid in her mind. The dog had been trying to tell her something. She was sure of it. Just as it had led her to the lockbox, it was now leading her toward more answers. She stared at the ceiling, knowing sleep wouldn't return. Too many questions remained unanswered, too many pieces of the puzzle still missing. Whatever the truth was about Samuel Hayes and her mother, Emily knew she had to find it. Not just for herself, but for Lily, and for all the unspoken stories that had shaped their family. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky outside her window, Emily made a decision. She would follow wherever this mystery led, no matter what truths it might reveal. The time for secrets was over. The morning sun cast long shadows across the weathered planks of the pier as Emily made her way toward its end, the metal lockbox heavy in her canvas tote bag. Her footsteps echoed hollow against the wooden boards, mixing with the gentle lapping of waves beneath. The familiar shaggy dog sat in its usual spot, its tail thumping against the planks as she approached. "Good morning, friend," Emily said softly. The dog's ears perked up at her voice. That's when she noticed him, a man in a well-worn flannel shirt, perched on a wooden stool near the pier's railing. His weathered hands moved deliberately across a sketch pad, capturing the pier's aging grace in careful pencil strokes. Something about his quiet focus made Emily pause. The dog trotted over to the man, giving his leg a gentle nudge. He looked up, revealing kind eyes and smile lines etched deeply around them. "Well, hello there," he said, reaching down to scratch behind the dog's ears. "I see you've made another friend. Does the dog visit you too?" Emily asked, stepping closer. The man nodded. "Every morning like clockwork. I'm Jack Turner, by the way. Local historian and amateur artist, though I use that term loosely." He gestured at his sketch with a self-deprecating smile. "Emily Carter," she replied, then hesitated before adding, "Actually, since you're a historian, I wonder if you might be able to help me with something." Jack set his sketchpad aside, giving her his full attention. "I'll certainly try." Emily carefully removed the lockbox from her bag, explaining how she'd found it. As she spread the old photographs and letter across the bench between them, she watched Jack's expression change from polite interest to focused intensity. "Good Lord," he breathed, picking up one of the photos. "This is Samuel Hayes." He looked up at Emily. "I've researched his story for years. He was quite a figure in this town before he disappeared. What do you know about him?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. Jack handled the photographs with careful reverence. "Samuel was a fixture here in the 1970s. Excellent fisherman, Vietnam vet. Had some troubles after the war, like many did." He paused, studying the image of the young girl. "I've never seen this photo before, though. Who's the child?" "I think," Emily took a deep breath, "I think she might be my mother." Jack's eyebrows rose. He looked back and forth between Emily and the photograph several times. "You know, I can see the resemblance," he said thoughtfully, "especially around the eyes." Emily told him about her visit to Mrs. Jensen, about the growing certainty that Samuel Hayes might be her grandfather. As she spoke, the dog settled at their feet, as if listening intently. "I'd be happy to help you investigate," Jack offered, his eyes bright with interest. "The Historical Society has records that aren't digitized yet, and I know most of the old-timers in town who might remember something useful." His expression grew serious. "But Emily, I should warn you, digging into the past isn't always simple. Sometimes what we find can hurt as much as it heals." Emily nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "I need to know the truth," she said firmly, "for my daughter's sake as much as my own." They spent the next hour discussing possible approaches to the investigation, Jack jotting down names and ideas in his sketchbook. The dog remained close by, occasionally pressing a wet nose against their hands as if offering encouragement. When Emily finally returned home that afternoon, she found Lily sprawled across the living room couch, textbooks scattered around her. "More mystery hunting?" Lily asked without looking up, her tone dripping with teenage skepticism. "Actually, yes," Emily replied, setting down her bag. "I met someone who might be able to help us understand what happened to Samuel Hayes." Lily rolled her eyes. "Mom, you're getting kind of obsessed with this whole thing." "It's just some old pictures and a letter." Before Emily could respond, a familiar bark sounded from outside. They both turned to see the shaggy dog from the pier sitting on their front lawn, tail wagging hopefully. "Has it followed you home?" Lily asked, suddenly interested. She moved to the window for a better look. "Seems like it," Emily said, watching as her daughter's expression softened. "Well," Lily said slowly, "I guess it is kind of sweet. And it did help you find that box." She pressed her hand against the window glass. "Can we give it some water at least?" Emily smiled, recognizing this small opening in her daughter's carefully maintained wall of indifference. "Of course we can." They spent the rest of the afternoon taking turns bringing water and leftover chicken to their new visitor, who accepted their offerings with gentle gratitude. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across their small front yard, Emily expected the dog to head back to the pier dot instead. It circled 3 times on their front porch and settled down, head resting on its paws, but eyes alert. as if it had appointed itself their personal guardian. Through the living room window, Emily watched the dog's peaceful form in the growing darkness. There was something comforting about its presence, as if it understood exactly what they needed, not just protection, but connection. A reminder that they weren't alone in their search for answers. The porch light cast a warm glow over the dog's shaggy fur, and Emily felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected ally. Whatever mysteries still lay ahead, whatever truths waited to be discovered about Samuel Hayes and their family's past, at least they had this faithful friend to help light the way. Next to her, Lily had stopped pretending to study and was also watching the dog. "You know," she said quietly, "maybe having it around isn't such a bad thing." Emily squeezed her daughter's shoulder gently, savoring this moment of shared warmth. Outside, the dog shifted slightly, settling more deeply into its self-appointed post. As night fell completely, its steady presence remained, a silent sentinel guarding their home and perhaps, Emily thought, guarding their hearts as well. The gentle rhythm of the dog's breathing was visible even from inside, its chest rising and falling in peaceful contentment. Emily felt her own breathing slow to match it, some of the day's tension melting away. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight they had this simple blessing: a faithful friend, a moment of peace, and the first fragile threads of healing beginning to weave their way through their lives. Through the window, Emily caught the gleam of the dog's eyes in the porch light, alert but gentle, watching over them as naturally as if it had always been there. And perhaps, in some way she didn't yet understand, it had been waiting for them all along. The library's archive room smelled of old paper and dust. They scent that reminded Emily of forgotten stories waiting to be uncovered. Jack Turner led her through narrow aisles between tall metal shelves, his flannel shirt brushing against file boxes as they walked. "Most of our military records are kept in this section," Jack explained, pulling out a heavy cardboard box labeled 1960 to 1975. "If Samuel served in Vietnam, we should find something here." Emily watched as Jack's practiced hand sorted through yellowed papers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the documents. Their new canine friend waited patiently by the archive room's door, having somehow convinced the librarian to let him inside. "Here," Jack said suddenly, his voice soft with discovery. He carefully extracted a file folder. Samuel Hayes, United States Marine Corps. Emily's heart quickened as Jack spread the documents across the reading table. Black and white photographs showed a younger Samuel in uniform, his face unmarked by the weathering she'd seen in the lockbox pictures. His eyes held a brightness that was missing from the later images. "Served from 1968 to 1970. Jack read, running his finger along the typewritten lines. "Honorably discharged after," he paused, his expression growing somber. "After a traumatic incident that left 3 members of his unit dead." Emily leaned closer, studying Samuel's military photograph. "He looks so different here. So, whole. Many veterans came back changed," Jack said quietly. "The war affected them in ways their families couldn't understand." He continued reading through the documents. According to these records, Samuel struggled to readjust. There are medical reports about nightmares, anxiety attacks. And then Jack pulled out another paper. Police reports about public intoxication, disorderly conduct. The dog whined softly from its post by the door, as if sensing the weight of what they were discovering. "Here's something from the local paper," Jack said, carefully unfolding a brittle news clipping. "It's about his wife Anna filing for divorce. The date is 1972. Emily's throat tightened as she read the article. It painted a painful picture of a marriage destroyed by trauma and alcohol, of a man unable to escape his demons. "It says she remarried within a year," she noted, her voice barely above a whisper. "To Gerald Thompson," Jack confirmed, checking another document. "A local business owner. Stable, respected in the community." He paused, looking at Emily. It must have seemed like a safer choice for her and her daughter. They continued searching through the archives, piecing together Samuel's tragic story. Each document revealed another layer of pain. Failed attempts at rehabilitation, missed child support payments, police reports of him being found sleeping on the beach. "Wait," Emily said, pulling out the letter from her bag. "The letter we found in the lockbox, could you look at it again?" Jack carefully examined the water-stained envelope. "The handwriting," he said slowly. "It's different from Samuel's signature on these military documents." Emily leaned in, comparing the writing. "You're right. It's more delicate," Jack nodded. "This isn't Samuel's handwriting at all. It's Anna's." The revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. "You mean she wrote the letter? But why?" "Look at the date," Jack pointed to a faint stamp mark. "This was written just 2 weeks before Samuel disappeared. Maybe she was trying to help him reach out to their daughter one last time." Emily's hands trembled as she reread the unfinished letter, seeing it with new eyes. The words of regret and longing for forgiveness took on a different meaning now. "But she never delivered it," she whispered. "Perhaps she couldn't bring herself to," Jack suggested gently. "Or maybe by the time she decided to, it was too late." The weight of the discovery pressed down on Emily's chest. She thought about her own divorce, about the things left unsaid between her and Lily's father, about the words she herself sometimes struggled to share with her daughter Dot as the afternoon. Light faded outside the archive's windows. Emily knew she needed air. She carefully helped Jack return the documents to their boxes, her mind spinning with all they'd learned. "Thank you," she said to Jack as they finished. "I know this is more than just research for you." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Sometimes the past helps us make sense of the present. Outside, the cooling evening air offered little comfort. Emily walked slowly toward the pier, the dog trotting faithfully beside her. The sky had turned a deep purple, with streaks of orange still lingering on the horizon. When they reached the wooden planks, Emily stopped, staring out at the darkening water. The dog moved to the edge of the pier, its usual spot, but instead of sitting quietly, it began to bark toward the horizon. The sound echoed across the water, a mournful call that seemed to carry all the pain and longing they discovered in the archives. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, feeling Samuel's story pressing closer to her own life than ever before. She thought about Anna, writing that letter, trying to bridge the gap between a broken man and his child. She thought about Samuel, struggling with demons he couldn't explain to those he loved most. And she thought about their daughter, her mother, caught in the middle of so much unspoken pain. The dog's barking continued, steady and insistent, as if it were calling out to someone far beyond the visible horizon. Emily stood there, letting the sound wash over her, feeling the connections between past and present, between Samuel's story and her own, growing stronger with each passing moment. The wooden planks creaked beneath her feet, and the salty air filled her lungs with each breath. In the growing darkness, Emily could almost imagine Samuel standing at this very spot, looking out at these same waters, carrying the weight of all he couldn't say, all he couldn't fix. The air grew colder as night approached, but Emily remained rooted to the spot, the dog's barks echoing across the water. Samuel's story wasn't just history anymore. It was alive in her, in the choices she faced with Lily, in the words she needed to find the courage to say. The last traces of sunlight disappeared from the horizon, leaving only the gentle lap of waves against the pier posts and the dog's persistent barking. Emily stood there, letting the full impact of everything they discovered wash over her, knowing that understanding Samuel's past was only the beginning of her journey. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen curtains as Emily flipped pancakes at the stove. She'd woken up early, determined to make Lily's favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes with whipped cream. The aroma of coffee and sweet batter filled their small rental kitchen. Lily shuffled in, already dressed for school, but with dark circles under her eyes that matched Emily's own sleepless night. She slumped into a chair at the kitchen table, barely glancing at the steaming plate Emily set before her. "I thought we could have breakfast together," Emily said softly, sitting down with her own plate. "Like we used to." Lily picked at her pancakes with her fork. "Dad used to make these too," she muttered. "I know, honey. He taught me his secret recipe, remember?" "Well, he doesn't make them anymore, does he?" Lily's voice cracked. "He doesn't do anything with us anymore. He doesn't care." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She saw tears forming in Lily's eyes before her daughter roughly wiped them away with her sleeve. "That's not true. Lily, your father loves you very much. Stop." Lily pushed her chair back with a screech. "Just stop pretending everything's okay. He left us, Mom. He chose his new family over us. He doesn't care about me anymore." Emily's heart clenched as she watched her daughter storm out of the kitchen. The slam of Lily's bedroom door echoed through the house. The sound transported Emily back to the archives, to the yellow documents detailing Samuel Hayes' gradual disappearance from his family's life. She sat there amid the ruins of their attempted breakfast, seeing the pattern so clearly it took her breath away. Samuel had vanished, leaving his daughter, Emily's mother, to grow up wondering why she wasn't enough to make him stay. That same daughter had grown up to be Margaret, who never spoke about her past, who took so many family secrets to her grave. And now here was Emily, watching history repeat itself as Lily struggled with her own father's absence. 3 generations of broken families, of children left wondering, of silence where there should have been answers. Later that morning, Emily met Jack at the harbor master's office. He'd been researching Samuel's last known movements, poring over old logs and weather reports from 40 years ago. The harbor master from back then kept detailed records, Jack explained, spreading out weathered papers on the desk. Samuel's boat was the Morning Star, a 25-foot fishing vessel. On the night he disappeared, there was an unexpected storm. Emily leaned closer, studying the faded handwriting. What happened? According to these reports, Samuel radioed in around 8 p.m., saying he was heading back early because of the weather. But he never made it to port. Jack's finger traced along the documented timeline. Other fishermen reported seeing his boat about 2 miles out, struggling in the waves. Did anyone try to help? Jack nodded grimly. 2 boats attempted rescue operations, but the storm was too severe. By the time they reached his last known position, they found only debris. The Morning Star had capsized. Emily's throat tightened. "So he drowned?" "That's where it gets interesting," Jack said, pulling out an old newspaper clipping. A woman walking her dog the next morning found a rowboat washed up on the beach 3 miles north of here. It was from the Morning Star, Samuel's emergency craft. "You mean he survived the capsizing?" "The theory is he managed to deploy the rowboat before his vessel went down. There were witnesses who claimed to have seen someone rowing through the storm, trying to make it back to shore." Jack's voice softened. "But if that was Samuel, he never made it. The currents that night were treacherous." Emily closed her eyes, imagining Samuel fighting the waves, perhaps thinking of the undelivered letter, of all the things he never got to say to his daughter. When she opened them again, she found Jack watching her with concern. "You okay?" "I keep thinking about how everything connects," she said quietly. "Samuel's disappearance, my mother's silence about her past. And now," she trailed off, thinking of Lily's tears at breakfast. That evening, Emily walked down to the pier as the sun set. The dog was there, as always, and trotted over to sit beside her. Together, they watched the waves that had taken Samuel Hayes 40 years ago. Emily reached out to scratch behind the dog's ears, noting the gray around its muzzle, wondering how long it had been keeping its faithful vigil at the pier. "Did you know him?" she whispered to the dog. Did you stay to wait all this time?" The dog's tail thumped gently against the wooden planks, its eyes fixed on the darkening horizon where the morning star had sailed on its final journey. Emily clutched the old lockbox to her chest as she entered the Historical Society's monthly meeting. The familiar scent of coffee and dusty books filled the small conference room where elderly residents gathered to discuss local history. Her heart fluttered with anticipation as she prepared to share her discoveries. "This belonged to Samuel Hayes," she explained, carefully placing the weather box on the table. The group leaned forward, their curiosity evident as Emily removed each item: the tarnished wedding band, the faded photographs, the undelivered letter. Mrs. Peterson, a retired librarian with silver hair, adjusted her glasses. "I remember when Samuel disappeared. Such a tragedy. His poor daughter." For the next hour, Emily shared what she'd learned about Samuel, watching the older members nod and contribute their own memories. Some recalled his skill as a fisherman. Others mentioned his struggles after returning from Vietnam. Each detail made him more real, more human. After the meeting, Emily felt lighter somehow. Sharing Samuel's story had made her connection to him feel more concrete. She checked her watch, just enough time to grab groceries before heading home. The local supermarket was busy with after-work shoppers. Emily carefully placed the lockbox in her trunk, covering it with her jacket before heading inside. Her mind wandered as she pushed her cart through the aisles, thinking about Samuel's daughter, her mother, and all the questions she never got to ask. 20 minutes later, Emily returned to her car, arms full of grocery bags. She loaded them into the trunk, then froze. Her jacket lay flat against the carpet. The lockbox was gone. "No, no, no," she whispered, dropping her remaining bags. She frantically searched the trunk, then the back seat, then the front. Nothing. Her hands trembled as she checked the trunk again. Knowing it was futile, panic rose in her chest like a wave. Without the lockbox, she had no proof of her connection to Samuel. No photographs to study, no letter to research. All those precious pieces of the past, gone. Emily forced herself to take deep breaths as she called the police. An officer arrived 15 minutes later, looking bored as he took down her report. "So, this box," he said, tapping his pen against his notepad. "It contained old photographs and letters?" "Yes, and a wedding ring. They belonged to Samuel Hayes. He disappeared 40 years ago. These items are irreplaceable." Emily tried to keep the desperation from her voice. The officer nodded, but his expression made it clear this wouldn't be a priority. "We'll keep an eye out, ma'am. Make sure to check local pawn shops. Someone might try to sell the ring." Emily's shoulders slumped as she watched him drive away. She knew the chances of recovering the lockbox were slim. Who would understand its true value? To a thief, it probably looked worthless. Just old papers and a tarnished ring. The drive home felt endless. Emily's mind raced with possibilities. Maybe someone had seen something. Maybe the thief would realize the items were worthless and dump them somewhere. Maybe she pulled into her driveway, barely registering the setting sun. Inside, she found Lily sprawled on the couch with her homework. "Mom?" Lily sat up, noticing her mother's expression. "What's wrong?" Emily's voice cracked as she explained about the stolen lockbox. To her surprise, Lily crossed the room and hugged her, something she hadn't done in months. "I'm so sorry." "Mom," Lily said softly, "but you know what? If Samuel's your family, that doesn't change just because a box is gone. The connection is still there." Emily pulled back, studying her daughter's face. When had Lily become so wise? "You're right," she admitted. "It's just I wanted to understand him better. To understand why he left. Why your grandmother never talked about him. Maybe some answers are in boxes," Lily suggested. "Maybe they're just in knowing that he tried to come back, that he wanted to make things right. Emily smiled despite her sadness, touched by her daughter's unexpected comfort. They ordered pizza for dinner, and Lily actually stayed at the table to talk instead of retreating to her room. They discussed Samuel, sharing theories about his life and what might have happened at Stormy Night. As evening settled into night, Emily felt drawn to the pier. She grabbed her jacket and walked the familiar path, moonlight silvering the waves. The old wooden planks creaked beneath her feet as she made her way to the end. The dog was there, its shaggy form a darker shadow against the night. As Emily approached, it turned to face her, barking with unusual urgency. The sound echoed across the water, not its usual quiet greeting, but something more insistent. Emily knelt beside the dog, scratching behind its ears. "What is it, boy? Are you trying to tell me something?" The dog barked again, pacing back and forth, then returning to stare intently at her. Its behavior reminded her of the day it had led her to the lockbox, that first discovery that had started everything. "Don't give up?" Emily whispered, understanding dawning. "Is that what you're trying to tell me?" The dog's tail wagged as it barked once more, its eyes reflecting the moonlight. Emily felt something shift inside her, a renewal of determination. The lockbox might be gone, but the mystery of Samuel Hayes wasn't over. Somewhere out there, more answers waited to be found. The dog sat beside her as she stared out at the dark water, its warm presence a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected guides could lead us to the truth. The waves lapped steadily against the pier posts, a rhythmic sound that seemed to whisper, "Keep searching, keep hoping, keep trying to understand." Emily's phone buzzed early the next morning. Jack's name flashed on the screen, and she answered it with trembling fingers. "Emily, I think I've got something." Jack's warm voice came through. "My friend who owns that pawn shop on Maple Street, the one near the old cannery. He just called. Says someone brought in a rusted metal box that matches your description." Emily's heart leaped. "I'm heading there right now. Wait for me," Jack insisted. "I'll meet you there in 15 minutes. The pawn shop sat in a weathered building with peeling blue paint. A bell jingled as Emily pushed open the door, Jack right behind her. The musty smell of old furniture and forgotten treasures filled the air. Behind the counter, a balding man in thick glasses looked up from his newspaper. But what caught Emily's attention was the man, standing at the counter, weather-beaten, probably in his 30s, wearing a shabby fisherman's jacket. In his hands was the familiar rusted lockbox. "That's it," Emily gasped. "That's my box." The fisherman spun around, his face draining of color. He clutched the box tighter, looking between Emily and the door like a cornered animal. "Please," Emily said softly, remembering Samuel's letter, his desperate plea for forgiveness. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to understand." The man's shoulders slumped. I didn't know it meant anything to anyone," he mumbled. "I saw it in your car and my landlord's threatening eviction. I've got 2 kids." Emily moved closer, her voice gentle. "The box belonged to a fisherman named Samuel Hayes. He disappeared 40 years ago, leaving behind regrets and unfinished business. Those photos and letters inside? They're all I have to understand my family's past." Tears welled in the man's eyes. "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "I've been out of work since my boat needed repairs." I was desperate. His hand shook as he held out the box. "Everything's still inside, I swear. I haven't sold anything." Instead of anger, Emily felt a wave of compassion. "I understand desperation," she said quietly. "Samuel did too, I think. Sometimes good people make mistakes when they're hurting." The fisherman broke down then, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Jack stepped forward, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "I might know someone looking for experienced crew members," he said. "Why don't we talk about it?" Emily hugged the box to her chest, its familiar weight comforting. As Jack spoke with the fisherman about job possibilities, she thought about the dog waiting at the pier. Its persistent barking had kept her going, kept her believing she'd find answers. Back home, Emily set the box on her kitchen table. Sunlight streamed through the window as she opened it, checking that everything was still there. The photos, the ring, the letter. But as she lifted the letter, something fluttered to the table. A small folded slip of paper she hadn't noticed before, tucked into the envelope's inner seam. The sound of Emily's sharp intake of breath filled the quiet kitchen as she reached for the weathered paper. Emily's hands trembled as she carefully unfolded the delicate slip of paper. The handwriting was shaky but determined, as if each word had been written with great effort. Tears blurred her vision as she read Samuel's final prayer. Let them know I loved them, even if I failed. The words hit her like a physical blow. Emily sank into her kitchen chair, tears streaming down her face. All this time, all these years of silence and mystery, and here was the raw truth of a broken man's heart. The weight of generations of pain and longing crashed over her. Mom? Lily's voice came from the doorway. Are you okay? Emily looked up through her tears to see her daughter's concerned face. The afternoon sunlight caught Lily's hair, reminding Emily so much of the young girl in Samuel's photographs. Taking a deep breath, she patted the chair next to her. Come here, sweetheart. There's something I need to tell you. Lily sat down, her eyes fixed on the slip of paper in Emily's trembling hands. The dog, who had followed them home, settled at their feet with a soft whimper. Remember how we wondered about the connection between Samuel and our family? Emily began, her voice thick with emotion. He was your great-grandfather, and he didn't abandon his family like everyone thought. He was trying to come back to them when he died. Emily carefully laid out everything they'd discovered. The trauma from Vietnam, the drinking, the desperate attempts to make things right. He made mistakes, terrible ones. But in the end, his last thoughts were of love and regret. Lily's lower lip trembled. Like Dad? She whispered double quotes, oh honey. Emily reached for her daughter's hand. Sometimes, Lily's voice cracked. Sometimes I feel like Dad just gave up on us. Like we weren't worth fighting for. Emily squeezed her daughter's hand. Listen to me. We can stop this cycle right here, right now. We can choose love instead of letting pain win. Your father's choices are his own, but we get to decide how we move forward. Tears rolled down Lily's cheeks as she leaned into her mother's embrace. The dog rose from its spot on the floor and gently rested its head on Lily's lap, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Emily wrapped her arms around her daughter, feeling the healing power of truth and understanding flow between them. We're not alone, Emily whispered, running her hand over Lily's hair. We have each other. And maybe Samuel sent us this guardian angel, she added, scratching behind the dog's ears, to make sure we found our way back to love. In that kitchen, bathed in afternoon light, 3 hearts beat in sync, a mother, a daughter, and a faithful dog who had led them to this moment of healing. The cycle of abandonment that had haunted their family for generations was finally breaking, replaced by the stronger bonds of forgiveness and unconditional love. The morning dawned clear and crisp, a gentle breeze carrying the salt-tinged air across the pier. Emily stood at the weathered railing, arranging white roses and sea lavender in mason jars. She had chosen simple decorations for Samuel's memorial. Just flowers, a few candles, and a framed copy of his photograph. Jack arrived early, wearing a clean flannel shirt and carrying a small American flag. Need any help? He asked softly, placing the flag beside the flowers. Just finished, Emily replied, straightening the frame. I hope people come. Her worry proved unnecessary. As the morning progressed, familiar faces began appearing. Fishermen in their work clothes, elderly residents who remembered Samuel, and even a group of Vietnam veterans in their service caps. Lily stood close to Emily, The dog sitting faithfully at their feet. Mrs. Jensen arrived with several of her friends, each carrying additional flowers. The harbor master closed the pier to boats for an hour out of respect. Even the desperate fisherman who had stolen the lockbox came, standing at the back with his hat in his hands. When everyone had gathered, Jack stepped forward to begin the ceremony. "We're here today to remember Samuel Hayes," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet crowd. Not as the man some thought they knew, but as the man he truly was, a father, a veteran, and a soul seeking redemption. Emily stepped forward next, unfolding the precious slip of paper with trembling fingers. "These were Samuel's last written words," she began, her voice growing stronger as she read. "Let them know I love them, even if I failed." A collective sigh moved through the crowd. Several of the veterans nodded, understanding in their eyes. Mrs. Jensen dabbed at her tears with a handkerchief. For 40 years, people whispered about Samuel Hayes. Emily continued. They created stories about why he vanished. But the truth is both simpler and more profound. He was trying to come home. He was fighting his way back to love. The community listened intently, their faces softening with understanding. Where there had once been judgment, now there was compassion. Old Mr. Peterson, who had been fishing these waters for 60 years, spoke up. "We all carry burdens," he said gruffly. "Some just way heavier than others." Jack stepped closer to Emily, his voice gentle but firm. "You've done something remarkable here," he told her. "You've given Samuel the dignity he never had in life. You've transformed a story of shame into one of redemption." Emily felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. For the first time since her divorce, since all the upheaval and pain, she felt truly at peace. The discovery of Samuel's story hadn't been random. It had been divinely guided, a healing gift for both the past and present. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, the gathered crowd slowly dispersed. They left their flowers at the pier's edge, a colorful tribute to a man finally understood. Emily and Lily remained, watching the sunset together. The dog sat at the end of the pier, but something had changed. It no longer stared anxiously at the water, as if waiting for someone to return. Instead, it watched Emily and Lily with calm, peaceful eyes, as if its long vigil was finally complete. The sea breeze ruffled their hair as mother and daughter stood together, their shadows stretching long across the weathered boards. In the gentle light of dusk, surrounded by flowers and the lingering warmth of community support, they had found something precious, not just the truth about Samuel, but the power of understanding, forgiveness, and love to heal even the deepest wounds. The autumn morning brought a special kind of excitement to Emily's small rental house. Papers spread across the kitchen table, adoption forms from the local animal shelter, now bearing official stamps and signatures. Harbor, the once mysterious stray from the pier, was officially theirs. "He's really ours now?" Lily asked, kneeling beside the shaggy dog and burying her face in his fur. Harbor responded with a gentle lick to her cheek, his tail wagging contentedly. "All ours," Emily confirmed, watching as her daughter's face lit up with pure joy. It had been months since she'd seen Lily smile so freely, so completely. The house itself seemed to breathe differently now. Where silence had once filled the corners, there was now the click-clack of Harbor's nails on the hardwood floors, the jingle of his collar, and most precious of all, laughter. Real, genuine laughter that bubbled up from both mother and daughter at Harbor's silly antics and devoted attention. Jack became a frequent visitor, always with some excuse about historical research or community projects. But Emily noticed how he'd linger over coffee at her kitchen table, how his eyes would crinkle with warmth when Harbor placed his head on Jack's knee. Sometimes he'd bring treats for Harbor or old photographs he'd discovered in the archives. "You know," Jack said one evening, as they watched Harbor and Lily playing fetch in the backyard, It's amazing how life works sometimes. A mysterious dog leads you to a lost story, and somehow everything starts healing. Emily nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The wounds of her divorce, Lily's anger, the weight of family secrets, all had begun to soften and mend. Like waves smoothing rough edges of sea glass, Harbor had become more than just a pet. He was their bridge between past and present, a living reminder that love could persist through decades, through loss, through change. His faithful vigil at the pier had led them to Samuel's story, and now his presence in their home continued to bring healing every day. As the weeks passed, Emily found herself looking forward to Jack's visits more and more. There was something comforting about his steady presence, his quiet understanding. They never rushed or pushed, just let whatever was growing between them develop at its own pace, like a gentle tide coming in. One morning, just as the sun began to paint the sky in delicate pinks and golds, Emily, Lily, and Harbor made their way down to the pier. The boards creaked familiarly beneath their feet as they walked to the spot where it had all begun. Harbor trotted ahead, no longer the anxious sentinel but a content family companion. Lily followed, her hand trailing along the old railing, peace evident in her relaxed shoulders and easy smile. Emily paused at the pier's end, gazing out at the horizon where sea met sky. The morning light caught the gentle waves, making them sparkle like scattered diamonds. Harbor pressed against her leg, and Lily slipped her hand into Emily's. "Sometimes the past waits for us," Emily whispered, her words carrying on the salt-tinged breeze, not to haunt, but to heal. If even one moment stayed with you, hit subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story written gently for the heart.